opinions expressed in this show belong to the person expressing them. They do not purport to reflect the opinions or views of Rancher or any other entity.
Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is in internet land. Thanks for joining today's show of Shipwreck, Sunken Treasure. Today's going to be a slightly different show, primarily because I did just experience a move. You'll notice that I don't have my green screen, so you can see my closet now and my outdated intercom system over here. And cool, I'm just making sure that last episode I had audio problems. I think I've got everything hammered out. We're not doing any screen switching anymore. I'm not doing any crisp. The new house seems to be working for the most part, except for the internet. But that's my own personal ISP problem, and I don't need to drag you guys into that. So to get on with the show, the basic premise of the show, Adrian does a recap. Adrian does a recap of what the show is about every episode. I think that's a good idea. The basis for my show is that I'm going to take a recently featured tool of the day, or maybe just a tool of the day from one of Adrian's 100+ episodes of CNCN, and go into a little bit greater detail. Ideally, I'll be able to make a pull request on that, and then I'll be able to show you the struggles and trials and tribulations that I've had so that you guys don't have to. Today I cheated a little bit. I added 5 elements to the poll. I think 5. Some of them weren't actually on tool of the day. So I'm kind of forcing people's hands. Like the one that we are focusing on today is not, I don't believe it was on anything. It might have been tangentially connected to some of the tools of the day, but it wasn't on there. So with that being said, let's dive right in. As you can see, well, let me actually just scroll down and open up the poll here. We had a couple different options. The one that ultimately won, and primarily because it was my vote, was Nixery. And what Nixery is, I'm going to have to do a couple layers down of recap, primarily because Nixery builds on tools, which builds on tools. But that's okay, because ultimately my demo of the day may or may not work. And so that'll give me some extra time to do some more explaining. Cool. So the product that was referenced there is something called Nixery. Nixery is going to, broad strokes, if you wanted to bring up this website, nixery.dev, Nixery is going to be a registry, hence the URI, and the Nix part is going to be Nix packages. And so the really neat thing about Nixery.dev is that it's going to be it was a publicly accessible repository or registry up until this week when I tried to pull from it and nothing was it wasn't working. Hence the reason why I wanted to take it away from Google and run my own private one. But as you can see by the scrolling, it might be a little bit small. Let me make that bigger. You're running a regular Docker run command off of this registry. This registry is hosting on 443, and you're pulling a container called shell. The interesting thing that's happening behind the scenes is that that it's actually building the container image as you make the request. So it's optimizing the caching, and we'll go into that in a little bit because I drilled down this week into the architecture and the ingredients of this Nixery deployment as I was trying to find out how to run it myself and the best way to operate there. But the neat thing is that the syntax is such that you pull in the packages and put a / in between them, and then you get a Docker image that has each of those tools in it. You might say to yourself, well, what's the point? I could just build a super robust all tools Docker image on the fly, or just build one and have one available in my registry, and I don't need this. I personally don't have one of those tools. I probably could build one, and I don't want to go through the process of having to update and add a tool every time. So this just pointing to a Nix package registry gives me the ability to, if I'm debugging a container that has network access, it's going to give me curl if I want curl, It's going to give me netcat. It's going to give me, I can find out SSL packages or SSL certificate issues. If I wanted to debug a specific language, there are language tools that are built in there, assuming that you're pointing to the right packages. And then, I mean, the list, in my opinion, goes on and on and on. And I used it while it was up for a while, and then I kind of fell off of it because I wasn't doing more in the weeds debugging. But with this, I'm hoping to build one for CNCN, and maybe you guys can show me whether or not there's use cases for it within our tiny community or maybe within the community at large. That being said, what I want to talk about is the reason why I thought this would make a good tool of the day. Are these a couple of the questions in the frequently asked questions section. I can see that it is open source. Basically, I'm only going to run open source tools on this because those are the only sort of tools that I can make meaningful pull requests back to. I'm not going to be able to, well, I might be able to, but it's going to take me a lot more effort to break down closed source tools and add features. But the comment here is, should I depend on Nixery.dev in production? It's not, they try their best. It's a best effort release. And I want to make it so that you can easily run your own in production and put this through its paces. So if we go, let's just go back to this command example, and I'll show you that currently it's not working. So if I go over here, run docker pull, error parsing HTTP 404 response body, and let's look up nixery.dev. Oh, now it is up and live. That might just be a problem now with my computer. Let's try something more public. So I'm going to copy that image, which should have shell get and htop. And I'm going to open up my Docker, my Kubernetes cluster, which I'll have to authenticate with. Pardon the authentication redirect. I have a cluster. Let's go into the default namespace. So we do have a problem with this Nixery test. Let's try and deploy a new Nixery test. I'm going to pop that in there and say, click launch there. We'll click on that to check the status. Failed open content, not found, not found. They might actually be working on this. Let's just try a basic one with shell, and then I'll go over the architecture that I said I was going to go over a little bit ago. Let's click save. Yeah, so I was unable to pull the image. So this is why we need to run our own nixery.dev, because that at this point I'd be able to go into my own infrastructure, find out why it's not working, and get the packages lined up properly. If I go back to Nixery, the thing I want to look at is, we'll go through this under the hood. The thing that I want to look at here, I guess we'll go through this process, simple process. I think we can go through it here, yeah. So basically, this is how I started digging down into it. The image manifest is requested. Obviously, we make the request from Docker or some sort of Kubernetes cluster. Nix touches and prepares the image content. Layers are going to be grouped, created, hashed, and persisted. This part here is the complicated part because Nix is doing all of the dependency layering behind the scenes to make sure that it's going to have a high cache hit. And then the manifest is assembled and returned to the client, and then the image layers are requested. So the part that I drilled in, because you guys can look at this website on your own, are that there are only two options that are available for the storage. There's Google Cloud Storage Bucket or a local file system path, and hence why it looked the way it did in the poll, is that I wanted to take it at least off Cloud Storage, maybe create a Helm chart for making available Kubernetes persistent storage, or maybe allowing different buckets in different providers. But the link I want to get at is, I've already got it open. But he made a blog art. One of the authors of this made a blog article that talks about how you're going to do the image layering in an efficient way. I won't go over this in nitty-gritty detail, but I do want to talk about, I want to show some of the graph layers. So the example here is that if we wanted to use the bash setup, we have the dependencies where the arrow is pointing at the dependency. So bash interactive has a dependency, readline bash, which then in turn have a dependency on ncurses, and then they all have dependencies on glibc. And then we go further into how that relates to Docker. And then the interesting thing is in the solution part, where we break it down, well, they broke it down into a quick and easy algorithm for popularity. And this might be a little bit small, I'll make it a little bit bigger because this is the relevant part. We can see that bash interactive, being the top layer again, is broken down into the previous dependencies, whereas each dependency relationship is now one-to-one. So we have bash interactive, glibc is directly, that's this arc here, bash here, ncurse is there, readline, and then each one of them, if let's say glib is a dependency of all of them, will have a leaf edge of glibc. Then if we start the algorithm process, after we've exploded it out like that, we're going to give counts for each of the leaf nodes. You can see that each of the leaves are glibc, so each one of them receives a 1. Then we collapse that up one layer. So the layers that would get collapsed are going to be ncurses and bash and ncurses here. And in the update, you can see that glib has been put to 2, and ncurses and bash have been put to 1. And then similarly in this ncurses here, it gets put to 2, primarily because there's this sibling relationship there. And then we go one level deeper. We can see that things get populated or get more popular. And then ultimately we get to one level, and this is the basis for your Docker image. You've got bash interactive, there's 1, there's glibc, which has 10 since everything was dependent on that. Bash is 2, ncurses is 4, a readline has 2. And so what he did for popularity is he sorted those layers. Since glibc has a high popularity, if we're going to make a Docker image on the fly and that image has, or that package stream has so many dependencies, then we're going to often hit the glibc dependency. And so if we cache that, there's a very high likelihood that we will hit that. We will need to pull that down. And then so you can see, I'm not going to go into the details of the Nix build. I don't think we have, well, we might have time for that. But that could be another episode all its own. If you want to start building packages with Nix, that would also be something interesting that I think we could have as a community, specifically tools. I do have Nix packages open. We could create our own Nix packages list. So if we look at the packages here, you can see that this isn't limited to specifically OS packages, like low-level OS packages, but you have access to, let's look into these. Let's look at applications. Here we could set up our own blockchain applications. We could set up our own video virtualization. I agree. Duck. I would also like to see more Nix stuff. I'm not too much of an expert, I would say, on it right now, but I think if we started a little bit of a contest or a commotion about it internal to this community, I think we could start to see it more. But back to, let me just catch up on the Discord. Ncurses is new. Ncurses library is a free software emulation of curses in System V. Yes, runs on WSL2. As a matter of fact, I built Nixery on WSL2. So we're good there. You can always trust that what I'm running is going to be compliant with WSL2. But back to the last of the optimizations, I just want to show the Docker image layer. Ultimately, what you have for Nix is that each one of these is the file structure, and it's going to be sorted from top down to the based on the popularity. And so if I did have a Nix, I might actually have a Nix image available. I might have deleted it, we'll see. But that'll show me the layers of the various dependencies. So in going over Nixery, the first thing I really did was I wanted to get familiar with the Git repo. The Git repo has a link. There we go. On GitHub. So this is the Google Nixery repo. Well, it's under Google now. I think they actually just recently migrated it. Maybe I'm lying. I don't remember exactly where it was when I first started looking at it. But it's all going to be very similar. Nuno gets another point. It's all very similar to what the documentation says, but I will point out that the configuration here is going to be this is the configuration that I was a little bit more comfortable with when trying to run my own, because I guess it's just all flat and laid out there. It shows me some of the requirements for the storage and for the authentication credentials to get the storage. Then it shows me the roadmap. I haven't looked at the roadmap. They've made pushes to this recently, but the issue that they're pointing at doesn't have too much life in it. But hopefully we can bring that back, or at least I can bring that back. I think, let's see if there are new issues. Yeah, I guess there's been new issues on January 2nd. But other than that, it's a project that could use a little bit more life. Going a little bit deeper down, we look at, let's actually just go into try and building it. So I think at that point, I looked through everything. I noticed the population count, the prepare image, all the functionality necessary to put it back into registry form. Nothing really seemed out of place here. There's a couple readmes, contributing readme, which I really didn't even get too far into because I'm Nix. There's a lot of layers of technologies here that I'm not comfortable pushing back on yet. But the thing that we want to look at is docs. You can see they're hosting the same docs for nixery.dev here. If we look at if we look at source, you can see all of the various components. So the run your own is actually the standard, what you're seeing on the website. So following the run your own, what we need is Nix to build Nixery itself, somewhere to run it, your own server, Google App Engine, Kubernetes cluster, whatever. This is CNCN. Chances are you have a Kubernetes cluster. We've gone over a bunch of tools. I don't know if we've actually had Kind or MicroK8s as tool of the days. But that's kind of, let me just make that as an assumption well, actually, I'll put this out to the community right now. If you don't have a way to run Kubernetes in a lightweight, I will add it to a poll next week and show you about 6 of the God knows how many different ways to run Kubernetes on your local machine or in an environment pretty easily. Does anybody in the chat, I'll wait for a couple seconds. Does anybody not have access to a Kubernetes cluster? Or would anybody like to see me go over a couple of the Kubernetes components? I don't see anything. So I'll put that in the poll just in case anybody's watching on YouTube later. They're always changing too, so it might even be a good chance to show the horse race of all of the various lightweight Kubernetes distributions. Cool. Yeah. Duck just posted that I have K3D. That's honestly what I do for a lot of my components, but I also run some lightweight Kubernetes on the internet. Anyways, back from that digression. We're going to try and run Nixery locally. And so within 9 minutes, probably not going to get there. But the first thing you want to do is go over and clone the repo. I have it cloned already. There's nothing crazy going on here. I've already gone through and installed Nix, but assuming that you haven't gone through and installed Nix, NixOS has the ability, gives you the instructions to do that. Basically, like everything else out there on the internet, you have the ability to run a curl command and then run the script. But let's actually just look at what the install script looks like, because nobody should just be randomly curling scripts on the internet unless they're from a trusted source, or unless you've looked at them already. Bin.sh, oops, unmask, temp directory, cleanup, require util, case, it goes over what infrastructure you're running on. There's no binary for your component. Yeah, so at this point we can safely say that it's not running anything malicious. So we'll go back. I could even just run that again. We'll go back home. Oh, right, back to my internet problems. So I'm installing 2.3.10. I might have had a previous version. Unpacking channels. Each of the, as you might expect, Nix is going to have different sets of channels. Kind of, if you're familiar with Helm, kind of like the different Helm releases, not channels. Maybe that's a bad example. But there are different channels for stable. Well, I guess it's just like a package manager. Nix is going to have different stable, unstable channels and private channels. But we have Nix. We have the basic operations of Nix, and then just double check that we're running Nix. They have a tag version command. We are running 2.3.10, the latest and the greatest. If we wanted to verify the installation, we could do verification with GPG keys. I'm not going to go through the process there. And then it's nice to know that there's a really straightforward uninstall command, rmrf/nix. So keep that in mind if you wanted to get rid of, if you wanted to save some of the information about Nix, because their uninstall operation is just to remove everything. So back to Nixery. We've gone through Nix itself. We have somewhere to run it. We would just run it locally because we have access to Docker. So we'll run that there. And we don't have a Google Cloud storage bucket to store and serve the layers yet, but we'll get there at some point in time. So if I go into, I am in the Nixery directory, as you can see by my prompt, Nixery. And we're just going to run a Nix build. And I believe they have, they have a Nix build command here. You're just specifying what sort of image you want to build. So we'll copy that, Nix build, capital A, Nixery image. Why did I not copy? Copy that. There we go. And then we'll watch as my computer struggles to build Nixery. So while that's happening, I'm going to kind of do the chats that I do to wrap things up. I'm going to be changing the formats of the polls next week because I want more time for people to answer the polls because the videos get posted at a later date. I want to run the polls for probably a consistent week. So as you'll notice, there's no poll on the community site right now. I'm going to put the poll out there later today, and that poll will run for exactly 1 week. So today is Friday the 19th, so it'll run till the 26th, and then that will be for the week after. So next week I'm going to run my own. I'll probably let Adrian know, so maybe next Tuesday you guys can find out whether or not you want to watch the Friday episode, so you can make plans accordingly. And hopefully there'll be enough time for people to answer the poll, and I'll be able to appropriately schedule things for what the community wants. Cool. So we have Nixery as an image on this local machine. So I believe when I do an ls, you can see that the result has been symlinked to the Nix directory because, like I said, the Nix directory is where everything is stored. That's primarily the reason why you're using Nix, is because everything's structured such that it's got dedicated file systems. We have a .tar.tz, and the way that we're running it locally in our Docker daemon is docker load I result. It should take a little bit of time. It's going to turn that image, it's going to load that image into my local machine, into my local container runtime. Docker images, you should see, well, it's going to be a lot of information. Let's make that a little bit smaller. Docker images, grep, Nixory. There we go. 51 years ago. Let's find out what the most current one is. Docker images. Vietnamese. Nixory. Apparently the timing signature when you do a Docker load is a little bit off. But there we have it. We have Nixory. If I wanted to run Nixory, Docker run. You have to expose the ports. You have to choose the ports. You have to choose the file system backend. You have to choose a path. Technically, that storage path isn't accurate. And then you have to make sure that you're using the Nixery image that has the tag of the one that you just created. So if I ran that, it's going to complain because that's not a proper storage backend. But that'll be the way that we start the Nix registry. Cool. So that brings us to about time. I hope you guys had enjoyed some of the show. Sorry that it wasn't too, it didn't go into too much detail into the components. Nixery is sometimes a little bit above my ken, but we'll see as I'll keep you guys updated on whether or not I host my own, and I'll make the link available in the community channel. And let me know, as always, in the poll if you'd like to see more of this or if you'd like me to switch gears. With that being said, thank you all for watching. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will see you next week. Take care, everyone.